So let's discuss Foreach loops. The Foreach loop allows the developer to implement a loop that doesn't require a termination condition or a counter, and I'll briefly explain how this is possible once we have looked at an example. So in this section of the tutorial, we'll use concepts with which you may or may not be familiar, namely interfaces, classes, methods, properties, and arrays. All of these concepts will be discussed in detail in upcoming tutorials, but for this tutorial, a very superficial understanding is sufficient. So in this example, we are going to use a Foreach loop to loop through 4 car objects and write the maximum speeds of the cars that the car objects represent. So let's first create an interface. Let's call this interface iCar. In our interface, let's create a method signature for a method named getMaxSpeed. A method signature is a definition of a method. The method signature in the interface cannot contain any code implementation. An interface is used for design purposes and not for the implementation of code logic. Let's also create a property definition in our interface. This property will be called carLabel. This property is used for the purpose of identifying the car. Right, so now we want to create the code that will implement the iCar interface definition. So let's create a class named car and indicate that we wish to implement the iCar interface. We do this by following the car class name with a colon followed by the interface name, iCar. So you'll notice red squiggly lines appear under iCar in our code editor. The compiler is telling us that we have not implemented all the properties and methods of the iCar interface, so we have signaled to the C# compiler our intention to implement code for the iCar interface, but we have not yet fulfilled this obligation. If you implement an interface, you must implement code for each of the items, for example methods or properties, that have been defined in the appropriate interface. You can think of an interface as like a contract between the interface and the class that implements the interface, where all the items, for example methods, properties, events, etc., in the interface must be appropriately implemented in the class that implements the interface. Okay, there is a quick way of getting rid of the squiggly lines in Visual Studio. We can simply right-click on the squiggly lines and select the context menu item labeled Quick Fix, and then we can select the Implement Interface context menu item. This auto-generates code for us that creates default implementations for our interface, method, and property. Right, so I'm going to alter the code so that it is fit for purpose. Don't worry too much if you don't fully understand what I'm doing here. This will be discussed in more detail in upcoming tutorials. Now that we have created our class, I'm going to create the calling client code, firstly in the main method. So first let's create an array of car objects, and we'll name this array cars. Again, don't worry too much. If you don't fully understand the code here, arrays will be discussed in detail in the next tutorial. So for each of the car objects that we are instantiating with the new keyword, we are passing in firstly the maximum speed of the car, and the second parameter is a label for the car. And now we can see the magic of the Foreach loop and how it is quite elegant in its simplicity. The code itself is also self-explanatory and human-readable. So the code reads like this: for each object of type iCar that exists in the cars array, execute an iteration of the loop. The loop terminates once all the items in the array have been traversed. So within our Foreach loop, code is included to write a brief narrative to the screen. Okay, so to be consistent, let's copy the code that has just been written to its own method. And then call the method we have named ForeachExample from the main method. Right, let's test the code. And as you can see, the code traverses each object of type iCar in our cars array and appropriately outputs each car's label, followed by the appropriate car's maximum speed to the console screen. So let me show you why the Foreach loop can be called without a termination expression and a loop counter. The reason is because the array abstract class, from which all arrays in C# are derived, implements an interface named IEnumerable. Behind the scenes, the IEnumerable interface makes it possible for a lot of detail regarding the functioning of the Foreach loop to be abstracted. So if I type array in the code editor, select and then right-click it, then select the Go to Definition context menu item, you can see the abstract array class implements the IEnumerable interface. This enables a lot of the heavy lifting of the Foreach code to be done behind the scenes. This will be explained in more detail in upcoming tutorials. Please see the description below for details of where you can download the code from GitHub. If you feel you've gained value from viewing this tutorial, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It will be greatly appreciated. And please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please smash the bell icon to be notified of future content, which will be coming soon. Please feel free to engage with me via the comments section. Thank you.